No, thanks.
There you go.
Thanks for that, Ben. Well, welcome all, and welcome those online. I'm glad to see we've got somebody in the room. It was a bit odd when I realised it was the England match, but hey ho. I guess I'm standing here feeling slightly a fraud, being with the Permanent Way Institute and being a chartered structural engineer. I know very little about track, know even less about signalling, and that's why today's presentation is going to very much focus on the station itself. I won't leave the track out completely because apparently that's not a good thing, but we'll go on that. Now, Ben was kind enough to send me a few notes about presentation skills, which was interesting, most of which I've completely ignored. But the one that struck me was start by telling the audience 3 things you want them to take away from the meeting. And I thought, that's an interesting one. So I thought, right, head down. I think the 3 things for me, and I should say probably put my slopey shoulders on, all opinions expressed are mine. They're not necessarily company opinions, but they're my opinions. I think Darlington is a very good example of how contract strategy can affect the outcome of a project. So I guess point 1 I'd say is take away when you're letting projects or involved in a project, think very much about the contract strategy. The second thing is Darlington, and I'll come on to the history and everything in a minute, is actually a grade 2 star listed building. And when you're dealing with heritage, most people or a lot of people feel, oh, I've got to put back, something that reflects exactly what's there at the moment, and I mustn't do this, I mustn't do that. And quite often that's not the right approach. When you get into the discussions with English Heritage, and we've had quite a few, they're looking very much for a bold statement that enhances what is there rather than tries to replicate it. So that's, I guess that'd be number 2. Don't be afraid of English Heritage. And then the last point is Darlington Station was built a long time ago, and the reality is it's had very little done to it over the last 140 years. So actually, when we now talk about minimum viable product, think about what that really means, and actually think about, is it worth spending more money now to get something that you then don't have to go back and do major refurbishments on in the future, because that will cost you ultimately more money. So those are the three takeaways. They've said press the button, nothing happens.
Let me just put it across to there. Make sure on the right screen. There we go.
Yeah. So firstly, why is this work being carried out? Well, the project is a jointly funded project between the DFT via Network Rail and the Tees Valley Combined Authority. Its aim is to address the capacity issues that exist at Darlington, and to unlock basically the wider the issues that we've got with the Saltburn lines coming through and everything having to cross the East Coast Main Line to get in and out the station. So it's to free up capacity. This is the existing layout. I told you I wouldn't leave you track boys out of it. As you can see, we've got the Saltburn lines coming up, and if you're on either the up or down Saltburn, you want to come into the station, you have to cross both of the East Coast Main Line tracks. Similarly, if you're on the up main, coming down from Newcastle, as it were, and you want to go into the station, again, you've got to cross the down main to get into the station. So it is actually, the layout is such, is causing quite a bit of capacity issues on the East Coast Main Line. And so the aim is to separate this out to make it better for all concerned. That was borne out. There was a capacity analysis undertaken. Well, it was published in 2019, so I'm guessing the analysis was undertaken sort of 2018 into early 19, and it basically said there ain't enough capacity. You know, you can read the conclusion there, you'll see it on the slides, but fundamentally it was like, you need to do something about this. You need to basically separate the Saltburn Darlington and Sunderland Darlington services out so that they're not interacting with the East Coast Main Line. So where do we go from there? After much deliberation, and apologies for the quality of this particular slide, this was we'll call it the first iteration of the revised track layout. As you can see, double tracking from Saltburn through into what was effectively 2 new bay platforms being constructed, and then an island platform, meaning that the up main could be basically diverted into the platform without having to cross the down main. With that, obviously, there are a few issues, because you've got to then join and get people from these bay platforms and the island platform in and out of the old station. And at the same time, TVCA were looking to actually improve the whole Darlington area, develop a new multi-storey car park, enhancements to the west of the station to create, for anybody that knows Darlington, as you come up, I think it's called Victoria Road. It's not the nicest entrance way, but you've got this great grand portico that sits there, and you sort of think, oh, this could look a bit better, you know, make something of it. So there was ideas to do that as well. And this was the plan for the, if you like, the station area. So you can see in a sort of a mauve, reconfiguration works on the portico to the west of the station. Basically, north is to the right on the page. What is known as the northern ramp, so improvements on that. In the light green, you have areas which TVCA were going to work on to enhance the areas either side of the station. The blue is the new building that's being put up by TVCA, which basically forms a large multi-storey car park, and then what will become the new main entrance to the station, with ticket halls, waiting areas, etc., etc. In the red, you've got the new platforms, and in the sort of the other green, I'll call it, you've got a footbridge link to link both sides of the station together. And then in the sort of orange, you've got alterations to the area in the central station, the central part of the existing station, to facilitate circulation up and down from the footbridge, to try and open up the space a little bit. The challenge with that is obviously the large sort of yellow blob is the existing station building, and to get the height to get across the East Coast Main Line, basically the proposition was that the new footbridge has to punch through the roof of the building. Now, you know, these things aren't entered into lightly, but it's the only sort of option out there. And that's what probably makes this one of the most challenging projects I think I've been involved with, and I've been involved with a few. But this one is quite unique in that respect. How are we going to deliver this project? And this is where I come back to thinking about contractual strategies as my first point. I was saying the takeaway. What we have here is effectively the contractual arrangement. I haven't put the DFT on, but they sit obviously at the top of the screen. So Network Rail have got contracts with BAM Nuttall, with the Central Rail Systems Alliance, CRSA, and with Alstom. And BAM Nuttall have a contract with us to deliver the design for the station works. So BAM are doing the station upgrade works, CRSA are doing the track works, Alstom are doing the signalling works. So far, that seems reasonable, but a bit odd. It gets slightly odder because we're all at different stages in our design process. We're ahead. We started ES5 back last year. Central Rail Systems Alliance started their ES5 a little behind us, but not by enough to be a major concern. Alstom are still in ES4. So they're a whole stage back, and we're trying to push detailed design out the door. And you can see straight away that's an area for potential conflict. Conflict's probably a bit stronger word. Challenge around the interface and managing the interface. And then I'd say with all of that, all of these people, BAM, ourselves, CRSA, Alstom, we're all used to working in the rail environment. So we all understand MicroStation, we all use ProjectWise, all of the tools very familiar to us. We exchange data amongst ourselves all the time. It's bread and butter to us. On the other side, you've got Tees Valley Combined Authority, who appointed Wilmot Dixon Construction to undertake the building works for the new station buildings, so for the Gateway building, the car park and the concourse, but not fit out the concourse. That's part of our scope. Now, Wilmot Dixon are a buildings contractor. You know, you wouldn't recognise them as a rail contractor. And so they had a challenge. Oh, you must build everything in accordance with Network Rail standards. I mean, to be honest, when I do a design, or my team does the design, I wouldn't put my hand on my heart and say we followed every single Network Rail standard. There's a plethora of them, and we know the ones we use regularly. They haven't a clue. And it also means that whilst you're trying to talk at, if you like, the low level, any formal instruction and requirement has to go up one side of the tree, across the top, and down. And when we're talking about working with pace and things like that, where the whole idea is to accelerate the process, that is a massive brake that's on the process, because it takes forever. And whilst, if you like, within the rail team, or the rail side of the team, we tend to be quite accommodating. If you're in a buildings world, there isn't that cooperation all the time. So that's quite a challenge. And that's why I think it would probably have been a lot better if Network Rail had managed everything, and brought in perhaps a different contractor to do the car park and that, somebody that's probably more akin to the systems and processes used within the rail environment. Interface management challenge. BAM were appointed, they're not only appointed as lead design organisation, their principal contractor, and their principal designer. So they have three different hats to wear. They have the CEM for the main works, but then you have CRSA and Alstom who have their own CEMs and discipline CREs, etc. But it's quite difficult to do the LDO role if you have no contractual link to the other parties, because you need to drag them to the table, and if they don't want to come, you've got no stick to beat them with. Not that I advocate beating people with a stick, you understand, but metaphorically speaking. And then again, you've got Wilmot Dixon sitting down at the bottom, almost completely different, under Darlington Borough Council TVCA. How have BAM basically gone about trying to manage these interfaces? They've set up regular interface meetings. They're held every 2 weeks. We hold one with Wilmot Dixon, and we hold another with the, if you like, the rail team. Because we as ACOM have interfaces with both, I get to sit in on both ones. Everybody is meant to be using a common data environment. Now, what that normally means from the interface with Wilmot Dixon, we take their models, we run a conversion, because that's the other issue. Whilst we all tend to use MicroStation, they're using Revit and good old-fashioned AutoCAD. So you have to run conversions, and then you have to load them in. And we encountered another little issue here, a 26 mil issue, being the difference between Snake grid in the area and OS. Railside, all working in Snake, Wilmot Dixon working in OS. The number of times you look at a level and think, is that right? What's it in? It's on an interface. Oh, is it properly, is it properly labeled? Absolute nightmare, and has been the cause of some of the grey hair you see here. The next slide. Program. Now, I could have put you up, or I could have had Gantt charts going all the way around the room, probably out down the corridor. We did a session in a hotel here in York, the integrated program, and literally we had a big meeting room and the programs went all the way around the wall. Bottom line, this has to be open by the time Darlington celebrates its bicentenary at the end of this year, sort of September 2025. And that's been the driver for all of this. And it's a challenge. It is a challenge. We started our ES5 design in February 23. Site started sort of the back end of 23 on working on what is known as Underbridge 98 Smithfield Road, which is just to the south of the station. Some works there. Early in 24, for those of you been to Darlington, you'll have seen they've been putting hoardings up, and now they're starting to strip out the central area. But latest programs show we are still hitting that date, and that is the one key. So let's talk a little bit about the existing station. The Stockton and Darlington Railway was opened in 1825, and it was one of the first freight and passenger lines in the country. It's on the picture you see there, it's the green line. There was no station on the line until, we believe, 1833, but then in 1844 there was a purpose-built station, and it's a place known as North Road Station. So it's not where Darlington Station is now. At that point, or by that point I should say, the red line was in existence, and that's the Croft line, part of what was the GNER between sort of Newcastle and York. And by 1843, there was a station actually where the red square rectangle is shown now. by all accounts, it wasn't the most prestigious of buildings. We have no pictures or anything, but it was described as little more than a timber shed. So I think that gives you a flavour for what it was like. It was developed or designed by a guy called John Green. And apparently the driver for the second iteration of the station there was a visit by Queen Victoria in 1849, where she was basically not amused by the state of the station. I think she was quite blunt about its condition. So second station was developed on the site by a guy called Thomas Prosser. And that was designed in 1861. By this time, NER had formed as a sort of merge of various little local companies, rail companies in the area. And he was actually, I think, their first permanent architect within the station part of the. It was a brick built, so it was one up from the timber shed. It was a brick built, but the platform was only 47 yards long, so not really that brilliant for anything modern. It had one platform, it was a single platform, but it had three. The station building itself had three ranges, north, central, and south, housing the various waiting rooms, toilets, etc., etc. And so I think it was if you like, the forerunner. But then as the rail network, I mean, it was an exciting time for railways. You know, the late Victorian, everything was expanding left, right, and centre. So the capacity was blown within, a couple of years, really. And so in 1885, a guy called William Bell, who'd taken over from John Prosser as the architect for NER, came up with a new iteration for the station. Opened in 1887, and this is the bit, I mean, about what does minimum viable product look like. Back then, he deliberately designed it so that he hoped that nobody would have to go back in a very long time to modernise it. And I think he'd seen the expansion of the railway, and it was like, well, this is the third station on here in best part of 40, just over 40 years. I don't want to do this again in my lifetime. I want to put something out there that lasts. So I think that's quite an important thing to look at. It should be said that the existing station does actually encompass part of the second iteration, part of the east wall, the central part of the east wall in the station, and the bit just under where we're going to punch a hole through the roof, it is part of the second iteration. All of the works, interestingly enough, as we're doing now, were carried out with the station operational, which again, back then I suspect, was quite a challenge. Just a few pretty pictures. This was off of one of the record drawings. You can see a very traditional looking brick built, focusing in the middle at the top on the central area, because that's the bit where we're going to interfere later on. But you can see on the far side this grand portico entrance, symmetric passageways, platforms. On one side you had the toilets, on other sides refreshments, luggage, etc., etc. So very symmetrical station. And then this is really to chart if you like, the interventions over the years. So top one, 1885. What you see are quite narrow passageways between the sort of central area. And the first major intervention, there was a minor intervention in 1907 where basically they'd just enlarged the parcel office at the end of the North Range by erecting a sort of a timber shed. First major intervention was to widen the passageways to allow better access to and from the trains. Now, we're not quite sure why, but obviously they must have been having issues getting people on and off or through, or people were feeling constrained. So they literally took out the central passages. Nothing happened then between 1909 and 1934. And in 1934, the central area was again targeted for opening up further and for the introduction of something called a passimeter, which was a very early automatic ticket machine, which you can see down on the bottom of the top part of the slide. So that was quite innovative. And again, it's sort of opened up that central area even more. And it pretty much stayed like that. There were interventions in the 50s when the South end of the South Range was redeveloped to put a telephone exchange in. In the 60s, the waiting rooms were basically refurbished. But the next, if you like, major intervention was 1978, when they introduced, well, they basically almost closed the central area back up again with the introduction of a purpose-built single-story ticket hall, some refreshments, a travel centre, various bits and pieces, and then a couple of retail areas. And it's really interesting because these works, I believe, took place in 1978, and the station was listed in 1977. And when you look at the quality of the works, you think, how did they get away with that? It's not quite in keeping with what you would expect. So I personally believe it was probably designed beforehand. It got listed. They roared ahead anyway, but who knows? There was one final intervention in 1986. So in 1909, when they put the timber shed on the end of the North Range to expand the parcel room, they actually decided to knock that down in 1986 and rebuild the gable wall of the North Range, north gable of the North Range, according to the 1887 drawings. So to restore it. And I thought I'd just have 2 or 3 slides here showing the lovely 1970s building, dominating what was the central area. A view looking south off platform 4, and the final one from outside, showing from what was the long stay car park, looking across the East Coast Main Line at the building itself. When you first look at it, you think, why is that a grade 2 stylistic building? It's not exactly attractive. But I think when you're inside it, you look at the steel work or the wrought iron work, the way in which the roof is, the shape, and consider its importance in the history, then that is clearly why it is a listed building. I said earlier, we had to do a lot of negotiation, discussion, collaboration with Historic England, and we actually did a sort of a study. So in our initial, sorry, wrong one. Yep, no. In our initial talks with Historic England, they were keen to see a really strong design. So this idea is, let's not try and replicate. Let's be bold. And as part of the ES4, an optioneering study was produced for discussion. The key issues was to have an open field on the bridge, to try and use it to give better views of the existing station building, to open up that view, and to use materials which were not mimicking but were representative or reflective of the materials within the building. So, oh, went too far because I know that that's not number one. Option one was a corkscrew design. Now, I have to say, apart from being contemporary, I'm not quite sure how this reads against the idea of the history of Darlington, the history of the station, the rail environment. You know, we tend not to do much with corkscrews, apart from on a Friday night. But, you know, that is what was option number one. And there's an example there of one in practice. Looking at the lights, it looks like it might be New York or somewhere like that. Option two, now we're starting to move into the railway field, was to take inspiration from the new Azuma trains. You know, it's an LNER operated station. And so they wanted to try and reflect the sort of slight curvature and the angles from the Azuma train. You can see in the impression that they were looking at doing a massive amount of glazing and structural glazing to interface with the existing station building. Take it or leave it. Option three was they thought, oh, we might try and reflect some track. And I'll put a picture of some track up there, because that is, to me, that's a good reflection. I then look at the sketch below and I think, yeah, I'm not quite sure how it reflects. We tend not to have track going in and out like that because trains fall off, but that's architects for you. There's none in the room, I'll take it. But that was an idea put forward. And then, so hands up in the room, which was the winner? Sorry? The second one, yeah. And the winner was the Azuma. Now, you'll see in some of the pictures later on, but you can see on the middle there, the sort of shape, the angular shape, reflecting the exact angle of the front of the Azuma train. You've got the curves, top and bottom, to, again, reflect the sort of curvature you see. You can see on the section that it's sort of rounded, so it's narrow at the top and bulges out as it comes round, a little like the shape of the Azuma. And actually, Historic England loved the idea. So we were on to a bit of a winner there-ish. I'll show you some pictures later on, but every time I look at it, I think it does not look like an Azuma train to me. I've tried standing on my head, laying down. It still doesn't look like an Azuma train. For me, the Azuma train's got a curved front, but then everything else is nice and rectangular windows all the way down the side. It's sort of like, yeah, it's a bit of a mind stretch. So just to as a refresher, memory refresher, this was the original scope, and I won't linger on it, but it's just to say, for the building, bridge, multi-storey car park, 3 platforms, portico, northern ramp. Now, it's obviously with any project going through nowadays, we're subject to funding challenges. Not a surprise, money's tight, we all know that. And between ES4 and the start of ES5, there was an interim stage undertaken which looked at what could be done to reduce the overall costs. So removal of platform 7, the second bay platform, was considered to be sort of, if you like, not necessary for now. It was very much, it would become more important if MPR goes on. So that came out. All the works on the northern ramp came out. It functions now. It functions quite well. It didn't necessarily need doing. And the works on the portico. As I said at the start, you know, the portico is it's a nice piece of building. The area around it isn't so good, but the regeneration of the area around it is still within TVCA's plan. So I think we'll get that. The vision as you come up to it will still be there. By the time we got round to signing a contract for ES5, further challenges had come in, set in the CRT from Network Rail, requiring us to reduce the overall width of the bridge. Originally, it had a 4-metre wide walkway. We're down to a 3-metre wide walkway with a number of passengers expected through there. Not a major problem. They asked us to try and simplify the design of the canopies and the waiting room, because the architects had taken the shape from the footbridge and tried to replicate it in other areas, and everyone felt it was a little bit over the top. So we looked at that and to try and use a cheaper cladding. Now, interestingly enough, when we proposed some alternatives, they actually didn't work out to be any cheaper. The only one we did change was the roofing material. Here we have the current proposed track layout. Not much different to what I showed you before, except you will notice that the twin track runs into the single bay platform at platform 6. We've still got the platform 5, and we've got a couple of extra loops, goods loops in there if needed. So very much keeping to the ethos that we had originally, but with a slightly different layout. And then just to take you through the different areas, this is the reduced scope. So you can see the portico's gone, northern ramp's gone. We got A, B, C, D. Anything in green is TVCA. Anything in yellow is the BAM ACOM scope. In a little bit more detail, in the central area, basically we've got accessible access to the footbridge. So we've got twin lifts to give us resilience. We've got a pair of escalators, again, gives you some resilience. And we've endeavoured to open up the central area again, because I think in the 1934 area, it probably became as open as it was going to be. And I think the 78 sort of additions really closed it in again. So the idea is to try and open that up a little bit and make it feel more welcoming to people. Just slightly more detail taken off of one of the architectural ES5 drawings. So you've got your escalators coming down. The footbridge comes down to a sort of split stair at the bottom. So you can hopefully go to the right part of the platform. Twin lifts. The area in the sort of light blue, I'll call it, is an existing ATM room, which we can't touch. Now, interestingly enough, and I'll come on to this in a little while, it might not look like that in the final scheme of things, but just hold that thought. The new platforms, one new bay, one new through. Minimum width 3 meters to allow sufficient space for ramp and wheelchair at the bottom. Pair of lifts. Canopy coverage is not full length of the platforms. It's only part length of the platform. Something that LNER are not overly happy with, and are currently they tell us they have secured some funding to look at platforms over the full length. We'll wait and see on that one. There is actually passive provision for an escalator. It's not actually needed at the moment, but if NPR takes place and platform 6 becomes a through platform and not a bay, they will need an escalator. There's a waiting room at the southern end of where platform 5 and 6 are still concurrent. And then as you go down to the end of platform 5, there's a waiting shelter. And here we have sort of an architect's view. The top part brings you from the vertical circulation, and you can see in the windows top there, there's sort of a zoomer shape reflected. Come down, it's a little difficult to see on here, but we've got some diagonals on the seating, which are an architectural feature, again reflected with a curve at the bottom to generate the Azuma effect. The canopy at the top did have various openings in it to reflect the curvature again, but they've all been taken out as part of the value engineering. And then if you can imagine over here, and I appreciate those on the those online can't see, you have the waiting room. It's actually turned round from what you see on the slide there, and again curves and everything to reflect the whole Azuma stance. Finally, we should probably look at the area C, which is the fit out. So Wilmot Dixon building the building, we're fitting out the concourse, and in it there's a large waiting area in the rotunda, the curved part at the end. There's a booking hall. There's obviously a new gate line, fully accessible toilets, including, changing places, gender neutral this and the whole range required under the scope. Lifts and escalators to take you up to the footbridge, again in pairs for resilience. There's a first class lounge on a sort of mezzanine level near to the footbridge. There's 2 retail areas. They're not massive by retail standards, but there's 2 in there. There's fully accessible, I've been told I shouldn't say that, accessible staff facilities. And there's rest points along the accessible route. So we've tried to cater wherever we can for all the requirements for the PRM, NTSN. There's just a slight drawing. Again, the quality of that isn't as good as what it was. So we won't linger. Finally, the multi-storey car park. You've got 672 spaces, various electric charge points, WAV spaces. There's cycle parking, 3 new cores, each with evacuation lifts. The interesting thing was when Wilmot Dixon designed the station, they didn't the car park. They didn't think it was going to be part of the station authorisation, and so they have been caught a little on the back foot because their stairwells and everything aren't quite compliant. And so I thought I'd finish, or almost finish. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. We're taking a journey. Now I'm actually going to do it backwards. So I'm going to start from the platform and leave the building. So this is a view of platform 1. You can see the stairs, the split stairs, escalators behind, the lifts over in the corner, and you can see the new footbridge and how it sits into the bay within the roof. The sort of copper coloured, told it's something rust is the colour, matching the sort of colour of the brickwork. The station clock isn't going to be there. That's its old position. It's a mistake on the render. It's actually going to be moved along one because where it is, it would be in danger of being vandalised. I think that's skip 2. So a view up the escalators. And again, you can see one of the original trusses we've kept in place. We've had to take some out to extend the roof through, but we've managed to try and retain as many features as we can. From the top, and this is with the glazing up there, this is where you probably get a view that most people will never have had of Darlington, of a sort of close-up of the roof. As you go across the footbridge, again, you're up close and personal to some of the detailing that you've only ever seen from ground level. And it is really very nice. You know, it's a very, very nice bit of steelwork. As you leave out the building and go across where platforms 5 and 6 are towards the gateway building, it's open. You've got glazing to keep people protected from the elements. And actually on the external sides of the bridge, you've got 2 walkways to enable cleaning of the glazing and maintenance. And you've got an exoskeleton, and the exoskeleton is what is being used to give the effect of the Azuma train. So when you get to the other end, there's a little link into the new station building. You can see the escalators there, and you can see in the distance the sort of concourse area. A little bit of colour contrast as you go along, a little bit green wall to try and break it up. Otherwise, I think it's going to feel like a very odd, long walk concourses. You're going to think, well, where am I? You know, into what I think is probably, I actually think this could be a really nice area. It'd be a very nice place to wait. Again, the amount of green wall has been cut right back. We still have a little bit of feature lighting for the architects. Lots of display screens, and this is where one of the retail areas is. And actually what you can't see is the booking hall is just at the end there. And that's now possibly being revamped to incorporate an assistance waiting area as well. And that's the end of the slides. I probably should just briefly say something about where we are with the construction. The demolition is well underway of the central area. The platforms are being constructed. All the precast units are going in. They're making really good progress. The piling will be starting shortly. Underbridge 98 is ongoing. CRSA are gearing up for some of their first track moves, and Alstom are working out some of their signalling staging. And that's it. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Phil. Okay. Questions?
The west entrance. So you come in the west entrance, presumably you go down to the existing subway to get across to the existing platform.
Yeah, so you come in through. Yeah, you come in through the portico. You go down the
Down
steps.
one to the platform, and up two if you go into the new platform.
You go up one into the. So you'd use it exactly like you were using the gate line now. If you wanted to go, say, platform 1, and then you go through that central area, and then take the escalators or the stairs to go across the footbridge.
So from a PRM perspective, was it ever considered to extend the footbridge all the way across to the western entrance to avoid going down one across up on the platform, then up again to get all the way over?
No, quite simply, I think it would have been well outside of this sort of scope, and the costs would have been phenomenal. If you think about the fact that we're currently punching through the barrel roof on one barrel, you'd have to take out 1, 2, 3 faces, and I suspect you would struggle to get the room, because if you think where the passageway comes up, you haven't got a massive amount of space there to get in some vertical circulation and not destroy the flow going up to the gate line. So yeah, I don't think that was ever considered.
So I never thought it would be easy to do that or cheap, but it's just the PRM element of it, of going down across up one, then up another one to get to the new platforms.
Yeah, I think what will happen is, I think PRMs will be encouraged to use the new entrance, because obviously they've got parking facilities there. They've got, an easy at-grade walk through, particularly to platforms 5 and 6, because you can come out at that level and just walk round onto the platforms, or wheel round onto the platforms. You've got the lifts to go up to the footbridge if you do want to go across. So I think there will be a shift away from using that as the main entrance.
You gain in some places
Yeah, it swings and roundabouts. We've looked at journey times and this, the whole 9 yards to try and ensure that there will always be winners and losers in the whole journey times thing. We're actually looking at a timetable change just because of the increased times to get to the new platforms. So, yeah, but in terms of your question, no, they've not been. That wasn't. Yep.
Is there also a new passive vision for a second main platform on that side? So
Yes. So, sorry. Yeah. So, yeah, I should have made that more clear. When platform 7 was de-scoped, the requirement is to provide a passive provision for platform 7. Now, there has been, I'll be honest, a lot of debate as to what that actually means. But yeah, there is space. Nothing that we are doing, as in BAM, CRS, or anything, precludes the introduction of that new platform. And all the space at the end where the footbridge comes down and there's big attenuation tanks and drainage, they're all kept outside of any potential platform 7 development.
Question online relating to the 90 miles an hour PSR on the up and down main at Darlington South, and whether there are any changes to speed profiles on the existing infrastructure. We've got the Darlington TME at the back of the room shaking her head.
I was going to say, can I pass? I'm going to pass on that one.
I don't believe there is. Current operations have pretty much every train stopping Darlington, so increasing speed in that area.
The business case to increase the speed when almost everything stops anyway.
Yeah.
It's probably, yeah, not huge.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's waiting the next renewal then.
good stuff. Tim.
Existing bay platforms 2 and 3, what happens then?
They stay. They stay. What they were going to be used for, I'm not sure. I suspect perturbation. I suspect they might go in there for maintenance. Well, because I think there's a CET in there at the moment. Although we are looking at installing a new CET on the 6, serving 6 for watering only, not flushing out. But no, the plan is that they stay.
So it may become somewhere that is used at either end of the day for stabling and servicing, not necessarily.
Northern Trains timetable wasn't going to split the trains out Darlington then. Yeah, Darlington, Bishopaulding or Darlington, Saltburn.
That's true, because currently the services tend to run through Darlington, serving the Bishop Auckland branch, and then
which they can still do, but that will remain as a constraint, because honest answer, I don't know. But I suspect that they're going to just run through.
So the bay platform won't become the default destination for things coming from the Middlesbrough direction. They'll still be through services running, through to Bishop Auckland as well. Yeah.
Structurally, how does your footbridge that you punch through the roof, how does it stand?
I hope very well.
We introduced you to a structural engineer.
Yeah, I know.
The session.
So the bridge itself is actually a 2-span continuous, taking you from the vertical circulation in the central area via a pier just outside the east wall through to a pier at the vertical circulation on 5 and 6. And then it's a single span from the vertical circulation on 5 and 6 through to the link into the new station building. It's sitting on what we call tree columns. Again, architectural license, but you've got basically 4 arms and a central column. There is no connection at all between the bridge and the new roof.
The existing roof.
The existing roof, sorry, yeah. That's one of the issues, because obviously having cut this great big hole in it, we've got to make it watertight. So that was quite a challenge. And we've done that with, quite how to describe it. It's a sort of platforms on the outside of the bridge which follow the shape of the roof, and it's then flashed down onto the roof in various ways. It meets at the point, I don't know how familiar you are, but you've got a curve and then you've got slight upstand for some glazing before it then goes into sort of a turreted, pitch section. So it comes in at that point and just sits pressed onto it. So the idea is it doesn't touch it whatsoever. The reason we've gone for the two continuous span is in discussions with the contractors, they actually want to slide the bridge into place. And so you need the second span to act as your back span during the sliding operations. Originally, when we did the ES4 design, we'd assumed 3 simple spans, and we'd assumed that the one within the station would be lifted into place, and you'd basically take out a whole bay of the roof, literally all the way across. But in discussions with various people, it was sort of decided the least interference with the roof, the better. So we're actually cutting out a hole on the west side and on the east side, because you've got the interaction of both ends. And then they're going to land the bridge. Current plan is the bridge gets landed outside of the station on the week before Christmas to be slid into position over a Christmas possession.
It looks as if there's a plate girder actually inside and something totally different outside.
It's amazing what you can do with smoke and mirrors. It's actually a fabricated plate girders all the way through,
Right.
With a composite deck, using what I call crinkly tin,
Yes.
and a concrete slab. The sort of, if you like, the dressing around it that you see is something called rock panel. It's reconstituted basalt cladding panel, which is fixed to give you the smooth shape, and actually that's all the way across. Inside the station, we've gone with, I won't say conventional parapets because they're not, but if you like, parapets not enclosed, because obviously the roof of the station gives you that enclosure. But across the exterior parts of the footbridge, you've basically got goalpost frames up and over to support the curtain walling and the roofing, and they just sitting down through onto the plate girders, which are sort of, I think they're around 1 metre deep, to give you the sort of an 1100 sort of upstand once it's clad round all the way across.
Architectural statements often only work when you go the whole hog, 100%. To what extent have the cutbacks destroyed the concept, or is it still there?
I think it's still there. I'm not a fan of architects, just because I really struggle to see the Azuma train in it. When you look at it in the 3D render, it looks like something out of Star Wars. It looks like a type jet fighter, whatever they were called. But that's still maintained across the whole footbridge. You could see it in the vertical circulation on the tops, so it's still there. And the only place it's really been scaled back was on the canopy. And if I'm honest, you'd only see it almost if you were laying on your back on the platform, looking up. So, and bearing in mind that most of us don't do that, I don't think it's lost anything. Again, it's reflected in the waiting room at the end. So I think there's sufficient theme there that the original has not been lost.
Okay. Any more questions online? Looking like there are any more forthcoming. So really interesting presentation. I noted down your 3 points that you were looking to
Yeah.
get across at the start, so we could come back and test at the end. So I think you certainly explain how a complex contracting strategy can affect the outcomes, and I got involved a little bit myself in trying to make how we work around not having to rebuild a partly built car park because the stairwell widths weren't quite in line with railway standards. I think you certainly illustrated the point that grade 2-star listing doesn't necessarily mean you need to replicate what's there, and then making a statement is the right thing to do. And you also talked about thinking longer term, and I think that came through in the design and how the development's progressing as well. So really interesting, great to see how it fits with the new building, and you gave us a bit of history as well in terms of how the station's developed. So if we can say thanks to Phil in the usual way, that'd be great. For those online, thank you for being obedient and keeping cameras off and microphones on mute. Hopefully you found it interesting, and don't give away the score on the football quite just yet. For those in the room, you can help us pop the room back to its usual shape and form. That'd be great. And we will head over to the York Tap for anyone that's interested once we're all packed away. So thanks all, and we'll see you again third Thursday in July.